High school is a period that Candace and I don't really know a lot about each other's lives. And we recently watched the show Freaks and Geeks, and we've been curious about, like what we were like in high school and some of the things that we might have went through and how it compares to the show. We're talking about that today and more on the Couple Podcast. I'm your co-host, Justin Tyler.
And I'm Kandace Tyler.
Welcome to
The Couple
Podcast. Damn it. Ah. Yeah, so we recently rewatched Freaks and Geeks together. Was this our first time watching together, or I think we might have No.
It's the first time we watched it together. I've been dying to watch it with you for ages.
I've seen it, and I realized though I don't know that I've ever seen the full series.
Oh,
because we had discovered that the only 12 of the 18 episodes that you can now watch ever actually aired. And I didn't watch this live, like when it was first on television. I think I don't remember where exactly I had watched it. But I'd watched it like much later, and I don't know if like maybe the last 6 episodes or so just weren't available
there,
or what happened. But we kind of aside from like the odd like clip online, there was a lot toward the end that I just don't remember. Or I'm just forgetting it. I don't know.
Well, I bought the box set from Best Buy.
So the DVD box set would have had all 18 episodes.
Yeah, I bought the box set. I think it was my senior year of high school. So I was really late watching it. It had been out for
fans
years.
Really campaigned to get that DVD box set released too. Like it was. Here's the thing. This is probably the greatest series ever released that didn't even get to finish its first season and was canceled.
It's fantastic.
It's so good. What is Freaks and Geeks? I guess we should get into that for some of our listeners who have never seen the show before. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. We're going to try to steer clear of too much spoiler territory. I mean, obviously we're going to get into some themes of some of each of the episodes. But we'll try to like kind of pull back a little bit. So you're going to get some spoilers, but it'll still be a worthwhile watch for you. Or hell, if you don't want any spoilers at all, then just go watch it right now. And it's only one season.
Come back
In a few days and re-listen to the episode. You won't regret it. But yeah, Freaks and Geeks aired. It's a teen dramedy that. So for those of you that don't know, dramedy is comedy and drama.
Thank you for letting me know.
I know. I really love mansplaining our listeners. But this aired on NBC during the 1999 to 2000 television season. It was created by Paul Feig. You might know him for being the writer for Bridesmaids, which is a fantastic movie, but also the 2016 Ghostbusters, the one with all the women. That on paper, like, okay, sure, let's do this. But I don't know. Did you ever see that Ghostbusters movie?
I never saw it, but
I did watch it with Milo and Margot, and they liked it. Like they did have funny moments. Like going back and rewatching it, there were bits that I liked, but yeah, I think I just really wanted like Ghostbusters only works as like Ghostbusters.
I can see that.
And trying to change it up too much kind of just breaks it.
Yeah. But I mean, Bridesmaids, fantastic.
And I mean, he's got other stuff under his belt too. But I think the big hitter here is actually the executive producer for the show, which is Judd Apatow. And this is one of his first like major projects that he was actually involved in. So this kind of like really launched his career though. And we have, movies like 40-Year-Old Virgin, Knocked Up, like all of these just great fucking films that really defined like 2000s and 2010s comedy.
Yep.
You'll notice that a lot of the actors that we're going to go over here in a minute, they have worked in a lot of his projects. So I think that it was kind of a great experience behind the scenes working on this show. I think that a lot of the cast and crew really have a lot of respect for each other and have pulled each other into other projects that they've worked on. And so this was kind of like that first like Judd Apatow kind of thing.
Really, I feel like 2 of the top, like when you think of like the early and mid 2000s like comedies, you think of Seth Rogen and you think of James Franco. And I mean,
Do you think of James Franco when you think of comedies? Like, I know
for sure. Yeah, I think of James Franco. I mean, Pineapple Express alone.
I
Like
don't know.
that's
For me, I just think of James Franco being the thing that kind of ruined Spider-Man 3. And what was that movie that you always like loved to watch? Tristan.
Oh my gosh,
and
Tristan and Isolde.
yeah.
I mean, I love a good like history drama love story. Obviously, we've went over this a million times with Outlander and all of it. But yeah, Tristan and Isolde was like a 2004. So like this was a few years after Freaks and Geeks, but James Franco tried his hand at he tried for a while to be kind of serious and do some serious roles.
And he's done some serious, didn't he?
Yeah,
He's done some stage plays too, hasn't he?
He has, yeah. And he did he's done a few serious films. He went through a phase, but I like how he can also be just fucking silly.
I think that James Franco is at his best when he just like, he's like, fuck it, let's do this. And it's just stupid.
Pineapple Express.
Pineapple Express. Yeah.
The movie with those like animated hot dogs.
Sausage Party?
Is that what it is?
Yeah, which is also Seth Rogen, I think,
Right.
co-wrote that.
Yeah,
and
it's great. Like they make a great
They
team.
are a great, they really
Yeah.
are a great duo. And that kind of starts here. This is like the first thing that they're both kind of on together.
Yeah.
I think
That
this
I
might,
know of.
yeah, this isn't their first projects, but it is their first time working together for sure. Before we get into like the cast stuff too much, I just want to kind of finish running down like what is Freaks and Geeks though. So this show focuses on two different groups of high schoolers. You have your freaks and your geeks. And it's set in a suburb of Detroit in the year 1980. So this was released in 1999, 2000, but it takes place 20 years earlier. So this very much was a nostalgia show. I think Paul Feig and Judd Apatow really wanted to capture their experience as geeks as honestly as possible for this show.
So they were the geeks.
Yes.
Okay.
They were the geeks in their school.
Okay.
And so the geeks, like the characters that we're going to get into that were the geeks in this show, it's very closely related to what high school was like for them and some of the things they went through.
I kind of hate that and I kind of love it just to see like where they ended up.
Yeah. So the major theme of the show is the sad, hilarious unfairness of teen life. And that sounds pretty accurate.
It's very accurate.
It's very accurate. There's a lot of laughable moments, but there's also a lot of like tension and serious moments too. And just feeling like, oh shit, I remember feeling that way. It sucks. I really feel bad for my kids having to go through that here in a few years.
Yeah.
So
I connect with this show so like I can just feel my own embarrassment like from the past while watching the show. I can like feel like all the different emotions that you go through as a teen, you relive that watching the show. I think it does a great job with like the dynamics of who you are as a person compared to what you're trying to be around other people, and also who you are as a person and who you want to be and who your parents think you are. So that's what I really connect with this show. Just navigating as a teen all of the expectations surrounding you.
It's a lot of pressure.
And you don't even know who you are yet.
And we're also, as we're recording this, we're coming out of us seeing Inside Out 2. And so I think that a lot of the themes of that movie, and also just having come off of like watching this kind of like adolescence, like coming of age story, just a lot of that, like discovering yourself and like, who are you at your core in your values and everything? Like a lot of that's just kind of like on my mind right now. But yeah, let's get into some of the people, the players, as you will, in this cast of Freaks and Geeks. So James Franco plays Daniel Desario. Yeah, Daniel Desario. So James Franco, you know him from the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. Disaster Artist, Pineapple Express,
Tristan and Isolde.
Actually got nominated for Best Actor in 127 Hours.
Yeah.
So he's done a few things.
He's done so much more than that too.
Yeah. And I mean, another film that he was. I'm not going to go too far into everyone's discography, or like, just go filmography, not discography. God damn it, whatever. You know who James Franco is,
yeah,
though.
Everyone knows.
He looks like James Dean. He's played James Dean. That was actually one of his first acting roles. I think was in the made-for-TV film about James Dean, the biopic. So you have the rest of the freaks. You have Ken, who is played by Seth Rogen. Seth Rogen knocked up Zack and Miri Make a Porno, Neighbors, Funny People, so many things, Sausage Party, so many things. Like I said, like these actors really do kind of define those like 2000s and 2010 comedies.
And Seth Rogen, even recent. He's been doing a lot of recent projects.
Yeah, what was that show that we watched a couple years ago? This would have been 2022.
I forget, but it was
like a mini series, like 6 episodes, but it was so
actually this
good.
year that we watched it. But it had him and then the actress who she's also been in a lot, but she was in Bridesmaids as well. Rose Byrne. Rose Byrne.
Yeah. Okay.
Who's a great actress. So yeah, he's done really recent amazing projects as well.
So we also have we haven't mentioned this person yet. He's playing a character, Nick, Jason Segel.
Yes.
Which is one of my favorite comedy actors of all time. I feel like my introduction to Jason Segel was actually How I Met Your Mother.
Oh, okay.
But he is also in one of my favorite comedy movies of all time, which I feel like kind of just sums up my life. I Love You, Man.
Oh, okay.
Just this constant search for like finding like a best bro that you connect with.
I remember just loving him and forgetting Sarah Marshall.
Yeah. And, is he a man or is he a Muppet?
He's a Muppet of a man.
He was in the Muppets too.
Jason Segel is one actor who, if you've seen all of his stuff, you just know that that's his true personality. Because if he plays the same exact personality in everything that he does, is that just not who that person is?
I mean,
do you know what I mean?
You could kind of say that the same about both Seth Rogen and James Franco.
Yeah,
too.
I mean, I can see that, except for, I don't know. I would argue that James Franco and Seth Rogen, like they have tried their hands at like some serious. There was an indie film I watched one time. I forget the name. With Seth Rogen in it. And yeah, he played like a very serious role.
He's definitely done, because I remember he was also in Funny People, which at its surface was about comedians, but it was actually more of a drama with Adam Sandler. Adam Sandler was in that movie, right? Yeah. That's the one where he's got like a terminal like cancer or something. And he's like that. It's really good. And I think that they're all very versotile actors. Like they've kind of leaned more into comedy because it's what they do, but like there's moments in each of their careers where they've excelled at other areas. Minus Seth Rogen trying to step into the superhero world and doing Green Hornet.
I forgot about that.
You forgot about Green Hornet?
Yeah, I forgot about Green Hornet. But Jason Segel, though, anything that I've seen him in, and correct me if there's something that I'm not thinking of, he is the same personality in everything.
I mean, sometimes they can lean him a little bit more into just kind of an asshole territory.
I mean, in everything, he's kind of like a little bit of a like just aloof asshole. Like
to kind of finish out the freaks, we have Busy Phillips, who plays Kim. I'm not actually as familiar with Busy. But she's been in Dawson's Creek. She was on ER for kind of like in the mid 2000s. She was on a show called Cougar Town, and she's actually having a bit of a resurgence right now on a show that I think started off on Peacock, but Netflix ended up buying out the rights for it, and it's there now. It's called Girls 5 Eva.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
She also played in, I think it was Maid of Honor with Patrick Dempsey.
Oh, did she?
Yeah, that was kind of a mid or early 2000s kind of romantic comedy, but she was in that as well.
Yeah, we do have technically one more freak, but I'm going to wait because that person is it's the main character of the show, and she kind of teeters the two.
She does. That's the whole, I feel like, premise of the show.
So we'll come back to her. Yeah. Running down the cast list of geeks, that you have like kind of the main focus of the geeks. Sam Weir, played by John Francis Daisy. He was in Bones. He's actually the keyboardist and vocalist for a band called Day Player. And he's also, I feel like in recent years, his writing credentials are actually where he's kind of done a lot. So he's co-written a bunch of films like Horrible Bosses. He co-wrote Spider-Man Homecoming. He did the recent Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves movies. So he's been writing a lot of comedy films. And then you have Sam Levine, who plays Neil Schreiber.
Neil
Schreiber, played by Sam Levine. The only thing that I could really think of that I remember him from was Inglorious Bastards. I know he's done like stand-up comedy as well, but
I haven't looked at his you have me wanting to say discography. I haven't looked at his filmography lately, but I feel like I remember seeing him in recent years in something like as a supporting role, and I laughed my ass off because he, like, obviously it's been some time since Freaks and Geeks has released. So it's been what, 25 years or so since it released. Everyone's older, everyone's aged, but he literally still looks like a child on a man's body, kind of like a child's head.
Kids' faces.
Yeah. And I remember when whatever it was I watched, I just laughed and laughed because like his face did not change.
Well, did you know he was actually 32 in the show when they filmed it?
Holy shit.
No, I'm just joking.
Oh my god.
You believed it? No, he was a legit teenager.
Okay. That scared me because I was like, there's no way like that man's is like that old now.
Yeah, no, he's
he has like some like weird, I don't know, face where like he just like didn't age, but like his body did. Yeah. And he just like, it was weird. Yeah.
So to kind of round out the geek side of things, we have Bill, played by Martin Starr.
My favorite.
I love
Martin Starr.
Like Bill in this show is really like, he's kind of just, he's the most like confident, like I know exactly who I am character in this entire thing. Like he doesn't give a shit that he's a geek. He's proud of who he is.
He's a treasure.
And his confidence ends up getting him some later on.
He's
not
a
like
treasure
all the way, but you know, like he gets some makeout time.
Yeah.
With one of the most popular cheerleaders in school.
He is hands down my favorite character on the show.
But like, holy shit, like think like he's just so awkward. And like it's not even just his personality, but like even his like body language and how he like carries himself.
He's such a good actor.
He's so good because that's not how he like is in real life.
Because you see, I mean, he's been in so many other things and that I've seen. He's not really that awkward looking. He's really able to like do things with his mannerisms and like face that like just make him so fucking awkward in the show. And then you
throw the big like Dahmer glasses on him.
Oh my god!
Got the
thick Dahmer glasses. Yeah.
But yeah, so he's been in Party Down, which was an HBO show, or was it Stars? No, it was Stars. I think Party Down. I can't remember if it was HBO or Stars. It was one of the two.
I think it was a Stars show. Maybe.
Silicon Valley, which is an HBO show. He was in Adventureland. He was in the newer Spider-Man trilogy, playing the I think it was the science teacher or math teacher of the school. Like he's the one that takes them to DC. He's the one that takes them in the second film to Europe. He's the one so he's kind of got a supporting role in that film series. And I think that he got that role because of his relationship with John Francis Daley, who, like I said, co-wrote Spider-Man Homecoming. Yeah. But so like these people have all kind of stuck together through their careers and kind of played off each other.
And you said Adventureland already?
Yeah, I did say Adventureland.
Okay. I love that movie. He's great in that movie as well. He's still like kind of awkward in that movie too. Like he always plays some sort of an awkward role.
He's cast as a certain type of person, but he plays it well.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have your freaks and you have your geeks, and then you have Lindsay Weir, who is the brother of Sam, the kind of like main geek.
The sister.
Sorry, she's the sister of Sam, kind of the main geek of the show. And she is a former geek, like goody mathlete. Perfect grades, perfect attendance, all of those things, who I think, was it that her grandmother recently died?
Her grandfather died.
Okay, grandfather. Okay. Yeah.
So her staple is she wears this old army jacket. I think it was her grandfather's because the grandfather died. And I think that was the catalyst for her trying to explore herself, who she is,
which is the whole point of the show.
Yeah.
So she kind of ditches her goody like more academic based life and realizes like, hey, there's more to life out there. Life is fleeting. What are some other things that I can do? And she starts to befriend this group of freaks.
She tries to ditch her goody life.
Yeah,
she tries.
I think that with all things in life, like there's balance. And I feel like of all the characters, she's one of the ones that I kind of I feel like I can kind of attach myself to in high school the most, because like I was, I did care about my academics. I did care about those things, but I also like tried to get into trouble and like push boundaries and do all of these things as this like self-exploration. So like we'll kind of get into that throughout this episode. But Lindsay is like, I mean, I think she's a lot of us.
Yeah. She's the main character for a reason.
But yeah, so she's played by Linda Cardellini. Sorry. Linda Cardellini. We've watched most recently, she was in Dead to Me on Netflix with Christina Applegate.
Yeah.
Fantastic show.
Which is, yeah. We haven't watched the most recent season of it, though.
She was also on ER along with Busy Phillips in like kind of like the mid 2000s. She was on Bloodline, and she had a kind of recurring role on Mad Men.
Don't forget Scooby-Doo.
Was she on Scooby-Doo?
She was Velma.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
How did I forget that?
That's like the biggest one.
I don't know how I forgot that.
Yeah.
Well, shit. Okay. Man, there's some like...
Your discography's off.
Man, because like, well, for whatever reason in my mind, I'm just thinking back to Velma. Like Velma was like big childhood crush for me.
Yeah.
So I'm just like thinking like, I just think Velma.
Yeah.
Not the person behind Velma.
Think of Velma. I mean, there's been many iterations of Scooby-Doo. So
we're talking like the Freddie Prince Jr. as Freddie.
The Freddie Prince Jr.
Okay.
That Velma.
Yeah, that Velma. Yeah. So she's kind of like, she kind of falls in between these two categories. So you might be asking yourself, what is a freak? Kandace, do you want to take a stab at what you feel like a freak is?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know really what a freak is, other than
I'd never heard it prior to watching this show, and like I don't know.
I've heard it people being like, "Oh, they're such a freak," but I feel like our
not
generation,
in the terms of like a clique or like group of people in school. Like, you have your jocks, you have your geeks.
To I think quote one of the characters in the show, Millie. Who is Millie, who is Lindsay Weir's former best friend
when she was a math lead and a perfect student.
When she's one of the geeks, Millie's one of the smart geeks. She asks Lindsay, like she sees Lindsay teetering between these two groups and hanging out with the freaks, and she goes, "Lindsay, why are you hanging out with the freaks? They do drugs and they have sex." So I think that's what really nails it down, is those like burnouts, the dropouts.
Mm-hmm. They are the underachievers in school.
They don't care about
not because they're
school.
not capable, but because like for whatever reason they don't care, or for some of them school might be harder for them and they struggle. And you're thinking like, this is 1980. There weren't a lot of support systems in place for people who struggled in school.
Well, not only struggling, but family life circumstances, and there wasn't as much support.
They really
for
do
kids like
all
that.
kind of have a completely different background. I don't think it ever really gets into Daniel DeSario's parents. Really?
No, we hear about we see everyone else's.
So it makes me
life.
feel like his parents aren't around. And like, to be fair, he's an adult. He was held back twice.
He was held back. So I think ultimately his case is he literally struggles. I think he's someone who struggles in school. And because he didn't get the support he needed, he kind of was like, well, what do I have? I have good looks. I have I can get girls. I can be cool.
Yeah.
So.
And then I think there's so like for the other freaks, you have Nick, who he just has an ultra strict dad who wants him to join the army. Like that's the only thing that his dad's ever telling him is like, you're going to join the army. Like you're wasting your time with drumming and these dreams of yours. Like you're going to join the army. So he's like
a creative guy. He has
it's kind of like a rebellion against like what his dad's like wishes are for him.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of like that struggle is kind of what takes him out of school a little bit. Like he's shown like throughout the series, he shows that he's done well in school.
Yeah.
He used to play basketball and like all of these things.
Like he has a lot of potential, but
it's kind of wasted.
Yeah.
And I think part of it too is his discovery of weed. I think that he goes a little too hard, and I think that kind of just like he doesn't really care about anything.
Makes him like very unmotivated.
Yeah.
So that makes him a freak. Technically, he does the drugs.
And then you have Ken, played by Seth Rogen, who his parents are rich.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really get into that until later on in the season, but you find out that his family is actually pretty loaded to the point where they're not present in his life, and he was raised by a nanny. So
he
that's
just
why
feels like,
he can just skate by.
yeah, he feels like his family doesn't care about him.
So why should he care about himself?
Yeah.
So I don't know, but this is our cast, and like I said, like it's a fantastic spread.
And you forgot Kim. She's like
I didn't forget Kim.
the female freak.
Oh, the female freak.
Yeah.
Her home life.
Like
yeah,
her
well,
home life.
we're gonna get into that. We have a whole episode that kind of
Okay.
hits on her home life. So yeah, we will get into Kim.
So freaks, you have sex, you do drugs, you don't care about school.
Mm-hmm.
You're too cool, basically.
You're basically the people that the school doesn't even seem to care about anymore. Like they just let them roam the halls and ditch class and whatever.
They're like, just fucking burn out.
Fuck it, whatever.
Like,
I'm not gonna waste my time on you. Which it's unfortunate that does happen in schools. Like even now, it seems to happen. I think there's more support systems in place for kids that kind of catches them before that point, but it does still happen. Special shout out to Mr. and Mrs. Weir, Lindsay and Sam's dad and mom. We have Becky Ann Baker. The only thing I know her from was in Girls on HBO. Then we have Mr. Weir, played by Joe I always fuck this up. Flaherty? Is it Flaherty or Flaherty?
I've always said Flaherty.
The only thing that I know him from is the heckler in Happy Gilmore.
Yes. And can I just say, if you are a Happy Gilmore fan, or like Adam Sandler fan in general, you've seen Happy Gilmore, you know exactly who we're talking about when we say the heckler. And when I started watching Freaks and Geeks, I would have known who that was with my eyes closed when the dad started talking. Just his voice is a special kind of annoying, but like in a funny way. And you just know who's speaking. It's hilarious. Just from Happy Gilmore.
So let's get into this. We're already a little ways into this, but let's like really start to. This is going to be a two-parter where we cannot get through what we're trying to get through in one episode. So we've kind of broken this up. Like we're not going full summary and like full analysis into these episodes. We're going to kind of hit on major themes for each of the episodes. And then we have a set of questions that we're going to ask each other, kind of just getting into our high school experience and kind of comparing it to the show. That's the idea here. We're not. So like, again, there might be some spoilers here and there, but nothing that's going to like take away from your experience watching the show. Please go watch it. It's so fucking good. But this is more about like kind of using the show as a catalyst for us discussing our high school years, because it's something that we don't really know a lot about. It's kind of this mysterious era of our lives that I'm interested to hear a little bit more about.
I'm interested to hear about yours.
So we have episode 1 titled Pilot. How original.
You know it's going to be a good series when the first episode is called Pilot. So the pilot's a fantastic episode.
Essentially, this is kind of the setup for, like we said, Lindsay's recently lost her. I feel like it was her grandmother that passed away.
It was her
grandpa. Okay, so her grandparent passed away. She's kind of like rebelling against like her traditional kind of path and starting to try to make friends with this group of freaks. So you have that kind of going on in this episode, like her kind of just trying to like seem cool to them. And then you also like ditching her old friends and kind of all of that. You also have Sam Weir, who is the main geek of the show, trying to just navigate the challenges of being a freshman in high school. This really kind of sets up like where they're at on the social totem pole throughout the rest of the series. And this episode for him revolves a lot around like he has this crush, Cindy, and he wants to ask her to the homecoming dance. Unfortunately, I mean, he gets to the point where like he does ask her, but she's already got someone else has already asked her. And she does tell him like, you know, I'll save you a dance though. And then for Lindsay, like she just, again, kind of just struggling with like, who am I? What is my identity? There's these people that I feel like I'm kind of pulled toward, but I also like, I still have like kind of footing in my old life and I miss my friends, but I want to discover who I am. So these are kind of like the major themes here are identity, adolescence, and family dynamics kind of play a lot into this episode. So first thing I want to ask you is, what was your experience trying to fit in high school? That's a loaded one. I know.
It is loaded. I really do relate a lot with Lindsay because I didn't know who the fuck that I was in high school, all through high school. And To make it even worse, I was more like Sam the geek as well mixed in, where I had zero confidence. And I really wish I would have had confidence because looking back, I should have.
Hmm.
I was a lot better than I think that I
It's really
was.
hard to know that at that age, especially when you
Yeah.
have, in the instance of the geeks in this show, you have
Mhm.
so many people telling you that you're not.
So many people telling you, just like trolls,
Yeah.
just telling you that you're dumb, on top of the hormones of it all,
Yeah.
telling yourself that you're dumb and you're ugly and no one likes you. Like just that constant anxiety, just like telling yourself that you suck.
There's a lot of trial and error in high school.
Yeah.
And for me, there was a lot of ebb and flow, like times where I felt like I fit in and times like I felt like an outcast. And it's not until like you kind of find your people, and that's why they call them cliques. Like you kind of click with them and you stick to them.
So for me, I feel like I did the opposite. I feel like I went backwards in high school. So I went into high school with the cool kids. I was part of like what everyone would look to as like, okay, that's the cool group. Um, but on the inside, that wasn't me. So everything that they were into, if that makes sense, it wasn't me.
Mhm.
There was a lot of like jocks, there was a lot of just everyone that was like very heavily into sports. I never played sports. My parents didn't have any money. I never played sports. So at some point I felt very disconnected. And from the outside everyone thought I was like one of the cool kids. But eventually as I got older in high school, like towards the upperclassmen age, I realized like, why the fuck am I hanging out with these people when, for one, I don't even have anything in common? And two, like, I don't fit in with them. Like, all of these kids have so much money. They're very, like, their families are on different levels. Like, why? Like, and I started to doubt myself too. Like, I'm not good enough to hang out with them because my parents don't have money. I'm not playing sports. I'm not, maybe I felt like I'm not as pretty as them. I'm not as, like, none of these guys will like me. I just started, tearing myself down to the point where I felt like I lowered myself into a group of kids where arguably you would call them the freaks of like my generation, um but just more down to earth people who were fun to hang out
Hmm.
with, didn't make me feel like I was less, or I didn't feel like I had to hide myself around them. And it quite the opposite. I almost felt like I was a little better than them. Does that make
Hmm.
sense? So I went from feeling below everyone to I almost felt a little like better because maybe they were shitty at school and I wasn't, or so it
Well,
kind of gave me a
you kind
confidence
of, yeah, and
boost.
you kind of get to this point where you have a certain outlook on life, and you realize that a lot of these people, they don't have that same outlook, and they're kind of missing out in a sense. Like they're so preoccupied with like whatever the fuck popular kids are preoccupied with, and that
Yeah.
you kind of realize almost early that none of it really matters.
Yeah. That's how I felt. I felt like there was nothing to talk about.
If you could have like labeled yourself as like one or two things in high school, like what would that have been?
Well, I feel like outside looking in, everyone thought every single group, no matter who they were, thought I was super nice. Like I was
Okay.
very nice to everybody. I could walk into a class and like really get along with any group, but I also felt isolated in the sense that I felt like I also didn't belong anywhere. So I was always kind of alone. Um, but alone but not alone. Like I
Hmm.
could fit in if I wanted to, but sometimes my confidence would hold me back. I was also like did a lot of theater, so I could be lumped in with like sometimes the theater kids, and I kind of just skated through like all these different groups, and I don't think a lot of people had anything bad to say about me. Um because I really just prided myself in just making sure I was nice to everybody.
Okay. So for me, I kind of kind of came a little went a little full circle here. So I remember growing up after the point that my parents got divorced, which would have been around like second or third grade. I moved to Kentucky in the third grade, away from my dad, and living with my mom. Like we were poor, and I'm suddenly like I'm in this like Appalachian community. I'm poor even in the eyes of this Appalachian community, and I always just I don't know, like there was this part of me that always like I wanted to like be one of the popular kids and have the things that they had and be able to dress the way that they did. And like I always wanted this for myself. And it's interesting because in the seventh grade, when I was 14, I was able to choose to move back to Indiana and live with my dad. And my dad was never like well off, but for like the community that we lived in, we were considered middle class. And like I never anything that I needed or mostly wanted, I had. So suddenly I get to this point where like I have a lot of these things that I've always longed for, but I realize like I don't really fit in with, like a lot of the people that I was longing to like kind of fit in with. And I'm happy because I feel like I realized that almost right away. I was self-aware enough to kind of realize that right away. So like even in middle school, I was kind of like, when I first moved in with my dad, I was already kind of pushing away from a lot of the popular kids and in my school. And I started hanging out with a lot of the skaters. I started like getting really into like punk rock and everything.
Yeah.
I'd played guitar since I was 8 years old, so I was starting to like I had a little like garage band going where we would just like jam out and fucking play Green Day covers. I don't know. But I kind of started like leaning into that area of things, almost to a fault. So by the time I got into high school, I had been kind of hanging out with these people and kind of surrounding myself within this music scene. And like by the time I was a sophomore, I was in a band. Then I was in a band most of high school. I was in a metal band. And I got annoyed because like a lot of my bandmates, they just wanted to smoke pot all the time. And
Yeah.
I really wasn't. Like at the time I was very anti-marijuana just because of like some of the issues that I had with my mom and the reasons that I left home in the first place.
I'm not cutting you off. I want to interject really quick. Me and you are the same here. In high school, when I went over to, the different group away from the popular kids, they all did drugs. They all smoked weed. That was something that I didn't do. And that was one thing that in my weird mind made me feel above. So that was like my line.
So you're saying like the popular kids?
So no, I'm saying when I started hanging out with the not popular kids.
Oh, okay,
so
yeah.
like the freaks of our
Okay,
generation.
yeah.
They were all smoking weed. And I was always like, everyone thought I was like the goody. So I was like Lindsay Weir in the show where she's hanging out with these people, but they also know that she's not really one of them.
Yeah. And so I that's how I felt in a lot of ways. I still had my band. They would spend most practices just getting high, and I really wanted to like, all right, I'm here to play music. Like that's what I was passionate about that. So I struggled a lot with that, and I think eventually I kind of like started to gravitate away from that group just because like as the years went on and we got through further and further through high school, they were getting worse and worse about all of that. They were getting lazier. They were like, becoming more of those kind of burnouts and freaks.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't feel that was me. I wanted more for myself. I had already spent the first kind of 2 years of high school not doing super great in school. And I like something just clicked for me. And I was like, I want to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was because I found something that I was actually passionate about that I wanted to pursue in school. So I went from being like kind of just an average student with the occasional bad grade to being a straight A student. And I still played music. I was still in my band, but I kind of tolerated some of the people I was around as opposed to like being really close friends with them. And I think ultimately that kind of like led to me kind of leaving that scene altogether. But I did, as toward the end of high school, I did start to kind of like, fit in with just, I found people who were more normal, who I felt like, like it wasn't necessarily the super popular kids, but people that could kind of fit in anywhere. Not because they were chameleoning and being fake, but because they were just nice people. And I felt like I kind of resonated with them. Like I liked being around a lot of these people. And I think that by the time I was getting out of high school, I felt like that was kind of like where I was at, was like, I just, I want to get along with everybody. I don't necessarily need to be liked by everybody, but I don't have to be an asshole. I can have conversation with anybody. I can make a connection with most people. And that's kind of where I don't know, I felt like I ended high school on kind of those terms.
I felt like I ended, and this is a regret of mine, and it's the no confidence thing. I felt like I ended high school on bad terms. I for sure had some like unmedicated mental health issues going on.
Which, I mean, back then, what supports did we have? And especially if your
Yeah,
parents were in denial about any of that,
yeah.
where would you have gotten that support?
So looking back, like in hindsight, I feel really just embarrassed and ashamed and like regretful about a lot of ways that I ended high school, or just like relationships and some grades and just things that weren't me. And I know now, looking back after going through a lot of things, that it was just like unmedicated um, imbalances that I had at that time that really started ramping up when I hit puberty. Um, so that's one thing that, as a parent now, I know to look out for when our kids are going through that change, because for whatever reason, chemically, when I hit puberty, things just went downhill for me.
Yeah.
Just education wise, like my grades went down. And I'll say I'm a really smart person. I used to do really well in school, and I could if I wanted to. The problem is when you have mental health issues that aren't being addressed, you can't do anything
hmm
a lot of times. So that I feel just like a lot of sadness for that time in my life, and I don't like to think about it.
I mean, it can be hard to think about, um, just from the fact that like high school oftentimes felt like an uphill battle every
Yeah.
single day, not because of necessarily like your friends and not fitting in, but oftentimes just because you felt like you had something you were struggling with that nobody understood, that nobody was willing to help you with. They were just saying like, "Oh, just suck it up," or
Mhm.
like telling you what you need to do. Like you need to make good grades so you can go to college.
Yeah.
Is all that people would tell you. So it's kind of like these expectations that are put on high schoolers, and it puts so much pressure on you at an age where you're not equipped to handle that yet.
Honestly, I'm not equipped to handle that now. I feel like I've never been put under so much pressure than since when I was in high school.
Yeah.
I I couldn't handle that pressure now.
hmm
Like, being a mom of 3 isn't as much pressure as that was. And I'm not exaggerating. I mean, we were expected every night to go home and do like 4 to 5 hours of work after school, when we had already been doing so much work,
Yeah.
and nightly papers, and just so much work on top of extracurriculars, on top of everything. And if you worked, if you had a job, well then like fuck that, because that, to me, that ended up taking priority, because my parents didn't have a lot of money. So once I was able to get a job, that was my priority,
hmm
because I wanted to have some sense of like security for like things that I could do.
Yeah, so that was one thing that I didn't ever have to really deal with in high school. I guess I could have gotten a job for extra money. But I mean, I was lucky enough, like it was just me and my dad. He kind of took care of a lot of those things for me. I never had to get a job. I focused more on getting involved in activities, and especially toward the end of high school. By the time I was a senior in high school, I was doing so similar to the mathletes. We had something called Quiz Bowl, where you would go and answer like more academic based questions in kind of that setting. So I was a co-captain on our Quiz Bowl team by the time like I got around to senior year. I was in theater. Like I was not only was I like involved in like the drama club and everything, but I was recognized as an internet like into the International Thespian Society. I had enough like credits under my name to be included into that. I have a certificate somewhere. I don't fucking know. But that was a pretty cool thing. I was president of the Japanese club. I was president of the history club. Like I threw myself into anything and everything. I was part of the yearbook and newspaper. I was throwing myself into anything and everything, just trying to figure out who the fuck I was. I would not have been able to do that though if I had to get a job. So like that does add like another layer of just complexity to where the fuck do I fit in?
It does
in this place,
especially when you're tired. You're mentally exhausted from school, and then you're working, and you just have no fucking clue what's coming next. It's hard.
Kind of went off on that question for a while, but I do think that kind of sets the foundations for like some of the struggles that we were having in high school. And it sounds like you were a little bit more aware that you were like struggling with depression and some of your mental health. I think that I was struggling a lot at that point, but didn't realize it until much later in life.
No, I wasn't aware. That's what I'm saying. So this is all hindsight looking back. I had a lot of unmedicated issues, and at the time I just thought that I was fucking a terrible person or just sucked. So, well,
you're not a terrible person. I will tell you that now.
No confidence.
Looking across the room at you, you should have all the confidence in the world, and you probably should have back then too. I've met people that you knew in high school, and they usually say nice things about you. So for you to
but some
years
people
later, people to remember like how nice you were, like that's saying something about you.
But some people can't see the internal struggles that affect everything around them, though, which is key. Like you can put on a nice face and still be struggling in every way.
Let's move on to episode 2, which is titled Beers and Weirs.
Great episode.
Yeah, this really is. Lindsay and Sam's parents are going out of town for the weekend.
And this is a moment that this
is one of those like
has.
Big tropes in high school. Her freak friends pressure, like, "Oh, you're going to have the house yourself? Like, what if we came over and hung out?
Yeah.
Maybe we can bring some beers, like everyone pitch in a little bit for some beers." This turns into like they end up getting a keg. They end up inviting, like, somebody tells one person, that person tells another person, and it telephones until like you have this full-blown party that is showing up at your house when you were just expecting a couple of people.
You were wanting an innocent get-together. We've all been there when you just want something like innocent, maybe to see the person you have a crush on, and it ends up being a bunch of fucking people that you don't even know and you hate.
Yeah. I think another reason that Lindsay felt pressured into throwing this party. So just to kind of give some background here, because I don't think we've mentioned this yet, Daniel and Kim, who we've mentioned several times, they're dating and they've broken up at this point. They broke up for this episode. And I believe in the beginning of the series, Lindsay kind of has a crush on Daniel.
Yeah.
So she's trying to
which is James Franco's
which is
character.
what kind of gets her into the Freaks group in the first place.
Right.
So she's trying to kind of like come across as cool and fit in. So she's feeling that pressure. And I think that's why she has this party. Cutest thing ever happens in this episode. Her little brother and his friends, in an attempt to try to protect them, just have this whole plot
protect
her. Yeah, specifically her. Have this whole plot around going out, buying a non-alcoholic keg and swapping the keg at the party. Fucking legend.
They're scared because they watch an assembly at school with like drunk drivers and like teens that have gotten killed. And they take it very seriously, as they should, and they want to swap the keg. And they're worried about their sister trying to fit in, trying to be with these freaks. And, he's the little brother, so he's not trying to, tell her not to do it or tell on her
but he
necessarily.
Still wants to protect her.
But he wants to protect her, yeah.
Oh my God. They're successful in swapping out the keg. The fucking placebo effect, though, when you think that you're getting drunk. And I think this is something that is a real thing with teenagers who drink, because if you think about like when you and I go drinking now, the quantity that we probably drink as adults that we shouldn't drink compared to like the limited amount of drinks that we had available to us as teenagers.
Oh, for sure.
There's no way we were actually as drunk as we thought we were.
I can say, so to relate this to my life, I never got drunk in high school. I never had one instance where I actually got drunk. I think I was too scared. So anything that I did deep down inside, I thought I was going to hell. So that was kind of the driving force of like who I was, because that's what was ingrained into me.
Thanks, Mom.
So thanks, Mom. I thought I was going to hell if I smoked the pot.
The devil's lettuce.
Or the devil's lettuce. So I would never say that to anybody, but I legitimately thought that. There was a few times. I remember one time, me and a friend, there was a margarita mix in my friend's parents' basement. No. And we were probably in 7th or 8th grade. I know that's pretty young. That's really young, actually, not high school age. But we were having a sleepover, and we were just drinking the margarita mix. There's no alcohol in that. It's just a mix that's sitting on the shelf.
Are you guys acting drunk?
And we were so drunk. We were acting so drunk.
Was this
remember.
You and Lauren?
Oh, how'd you know? Hey, Lauren. It was me, Lauren, and
Listeners,
our friend.
go listen to episode 2 of the Couple Podcast featuring Lauren.
It was me, Lauren, and our friend Brittany's basement. And so many fun times there. But yes, we got very placebo effect drunk off of the margarita mix. And I remember dancing on their pool table. And just like we were so drunk.
Like Coyote Ugly style?
Oh, for sure. Like we were. And so that was the extent of my drinking in high school. I think I may have taken a few sips maybe. But I didn't like the taste. So I always pretended like, I'm so fucking tipsy after like 2 sips of like Bud Light.
I can't say that I ever quite went that hard on some non-alcoholic drinks. But I definitely, I think that like most teenagers like exaggerated how drunk I was, because you kind of know in your heart, like I can get away with things that I wouldn't normally get away with.
And it's fun, right? You feel like you're cool.
Yeah. A little bit. I feel
bit.
Like the culture around that is kind of changing now. And I think that people are being held responsible for the actions that they take when they're drunk, especially when they only think that they're drunk. But
I'm talking about at that time.
At that time. So, I mean, for me, I remember like my dad would let me have the occasional, like New Year's, I'd have champagne. I would not go in too hard, but I'd have a glass of champagne at New Year's. By the time I was like 14 or so, like my dad would allow me to have the occasional drink of something. Like if he was like making like a daiquiri or a margarita or something, he would let me have one or a sip of one.
That was not my parents at all.
By the time I was like 16, like my dad would let me have the occasional beer. I know some parents who let their kids like that age like full on drink if they want to. That was not my experience. That will not be my experience with my kids. I want them to understand there's balance with alcohol, and I want my kids to understand that balance. It's not fully a bad thing, but it's also like there are consequences to drinking, and you have to be responsible. I want my kids to understand the importance of that, even in their teen years, because kids gonna be doing what kids gonna be doing regardless.
And I feel like even though it's because I thought I was going to hell, I think that's one thing that I did well in high school. Like I wasn't under the influence. And honestly, I didn't need to be because I, again,
you're crazy,
unmedicated mental illness.
I did drink occasional small amounts of alcohol, but I don't think that I truly ever got drunk in high school. I also I didn't really go to parties a lot. And when I did go to parties, they weren't really drinking parties. So for me, like a party in high school, like the ones that I attended and enjoyed, I would have an annual Halloween party at my house every year where we would have different areas set up in the house. Like one would be, I'd have a theme, and one room would be showcasing like horror films. One room would be set up with like video games going. There'd be a whole bunch of pizza and food.
And then
there
would
be like an outside section
kegs
with like a fire going and stuff. And like Fake heads. What?
I said, and then the room with fake kegs, like
Oh, fake kegs. I thought you
yeah.
said fake heads. I was like, I guess it's Halloween. I don't know. But no, there was never drinking involved there. It was always just like we'd have pizza and soda and scary
like
movies and video games
semi-innocent,
it wasn't a big, like, I would invite like maybe like between 12 and 20 people to this. So it was always a lot of fun though. And we got into trouble like teenagers do. Like I remember one year specifically, I was briefly dating a girl who was a little younger than me and couldn't drive yet. Um, and like this was like I think my junior year. So like I had just started driving. It wasn't like super like way younger than me. But I had to take her home really quick, and I kind of left my house. Kind of left my house while like all these other people were at my house attending this party to drive her home. But on the way to drive her home, I had a couple other friends in the car with me. There was a local kind of just like kind of like a small retail store that had like some carts and stuff out in the parking lot, and they'd shut down without cleaning up all the carts. We stole a shopping cart.
Oh.
And put it in my trunk, brought it back to the house, and this is the kind of shit that shenanigans we were getting into. Was we were getting in the shopping cart and pushing each other down the street, jackass style, like into the curb and launching each other and doing stuff like that.
Teenagers think they're just invincible. Something about being a teenager, like there's no consequences in your little teenage brain.
It's because you haven't had to deal with the consequences yet. So you really feel like you're untouchable.
The consequences come quicker than you think.
Yeah. So yeah, major themes of this episode though are peer pressure, fitting in, and rebellion. We've kind of hit on some of these things already. So I mean, you didn't really drink in high school, but you did attend parties, I'm assuming.
I would attend parties. I didn't really partake in the drinking. I honestly wasn't a partier. It wasn't until like again, it was much later. I felt like kind of a loner later. So any interaction I would have, it wasn't big parties. It was more like small groups of people just like kind of getting into trouble, but nothing. Exactly. It was very innocent shenanigans, if that makes sense.
Honestly, like I fucking loved that.
Yeah.
It was good. It was a good time.
We would do weird shit like shopping cart shit, like just weird. I mean,
maybe
like,
don't steal a shopping cart,
right?
But
we didn't steal,
what you were doing with the shopping, we did return the shopping cart way later. I think almost a year later.
We were hurting anybody. We were just like, do you remember ever just driving around?
Back when you could afford to just drive around?
Yeah. Do you remember just being a teenager, filling your car with people and just driving around?
Yeah, it was. I mean, back when they actually let teenagers drive around.
Which is a big thing in the show that they do.
I got my license right before the gas spike and economic fucking downfall of like around like the 2007 2008 era. I did get my license before this, so I did have a little bit of time before gas prices like fucking skyrocketed up to like $4, where I was able to enjoy like my like dollar, like less than $1.50 gas and actually get around.
I never got that.
So you never got that.
I'm 2 years younger than you, so and I got my license really late. My parents wouldn't let me drive, so I was almost 18 when I got my license.
But at least by the time that you were driving, I feel like you get to a certain point where it's not like you're not going out for like fun drives anymore. You're going, it's a utility. You're going from point A to point B for work, for school, for whatever it is. Like the high school years, when you're a teenager in high school years, that really is like peak, like just going out and fucking driving around.
Well, because you want to be independent from your parents and you don't have your own home. That's the only way to express that. So you have to drive around and be out and about.
So you didn't drink at parties, but were there any other instances of like just peer pressure that you can remember facing in high school?
So many. Everyone wanted me to smoke weed. Yeah. Like any group I was in, I was being pressured. And I did eventually give in. I did try it a couple of times, but it was like those puffs that like aren't really inhaling type of puffs. So I never really experienced like getting high in high school that I can remember. But yeah, I was very adamant about like, I just wasn't interested in drugs. Like I didn't want to do it, but I felt a lot of peer pressure. I would say, and this is a whole different thing that a lot of teens deal with, but like the peer pressure to have sex is always a big one.
That's a huge one.
And I was always, again, I didn't want to go to hell. So that was a really hard one for me, just to try and like push that off for as long as I could.
Mm-hmm.
And then even when I did, it's not like a fond like memory, because I was like, it's tainted with my guilt of like going to hell.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was never like, sometimes I wish I could look at my younger self and just be like, hey, have a good time. Like, just enjoy your life and don't be so serious, because you have so many years ahead of you to be serious. This is your time to just be silly and have fun and like be a kid and be a teen, do what teens do. I'm not saying that I wish I would have done drugs or all through high school. I just wish I would have loosened the fuck up a little bit
without like going crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll come back to the peer pressure around sex in a few episodes from now. But yeah, like those pressures were definitely there. Like I said, like my bandmates, they were smoking all the time, and I kind of had a bad relationship with marijuana at that point and refused to do it. Which kind of, I mean, it made it hard to connect with them. It made it like, awkward when they were always wanting to smoke, and I just wanted to play music. So that was a difficult thing. And I was always proud of the fact that I was kind of able to stand my ground on that, though. I didn't smoke marijuana for the first time until I think my sophomore year of college. So much, much later. As far as alcohol, do you remember when you had your first actual drink of alcohol that wasn't just a margarita mixer?
Yeah. I mean, there was many times where I pretended to drink beer, but didn't really drink it. But the first time that I actually did have some drinks, I got drunk. Like the first time that I actually legitimately tried. But
because you don't know what you can't, like, you don't know your limits at this point. So you just fucking go.
And, but I was out of high school.
Okay.
It was like, I was like 18 or 19. I was out of high school. And I was at a party. I was at a party with like work friends, from the theater, and they had a bunch of like Jello shots. I think that's what did me in, is they made all these Jello shots.
Will just fuck you up anyway, because first off, you never know how much alcohol is in the Jello shots.
Yeah.
It really comes down to the recipe and the person making them, but also like the sweetness of them.
Yeah.
Something about like mixing sweet things with alcohol, just, it's not a good combination. People, why the fuck do you base all of your alcoholic drinks on like sweet shit?
I don't know, but it's disgusting. I can't stand that shit now. But at the time I was like, oh, they made this tray of Jello shots. Like, I'm not really a drinker, but I'm going to eat like 7 of these delicious Jello cups.
Yeah.
And now it makes me, and then I just wanted to drink the beer that was available, because I was already getting, like, it was just like a domino effect.
And mixing, what is it? Beer before liquor, never been sicker.
It was
liquor
bad.
Before beer, you're in the clear.
Well, I wasn't that night. Yeah. So
I guess you had Jello shots first. So
yeah, it was a bad
combo
night.
Still though, the sweetness.
Honestly, I have to say, I'm very proud of this. Well, I'm not proud of this night. That is the only time where I was semi ever in my life blackout drunk. I hear so many stories of people saying like, oh, I don't even remember last night. That never happens to me. I have a great memory when I'm drinking for the most part. Like, I'm never like blacked out, or like, I'm always wondering if people are like lying about that.
So they're not.
Are you sure?
I can tell you, I've had a couple of experiences being blackout drunk.
Okay.
Maybe we'll have an episode where we talk more about our college years at some point.
Like, I wasn't full like
today.
blackout, but the only thing is like, I just remember it put me to sleep. I don't remember going to bed is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
So
shit. Like, yeah, when you get into the college and like the social experience really is based around drinking most of the time.
Yeah.
You want to fit in. Like you're like, oh yeah, I finally found my people. I really like this group. Like, they're drinking hard. I'm drinking hard. I'm gonna have sex tonight. Like all these things, like you're just fucking drinking. You're drinking. Blackout drunk does happen. I think that this is where you and I kind of differ because you kind of missed out on the traditional college experience.
Right.
So
yeah,
we should have an episode at some point. We'll find a reason to kind of like tie college into that. But let's get back to high school. So episode 3. I know this is one of your favorite episodes, Tricks and Treats.
Yes.
This is a Halloween episode. And it deals a lot with kind of just growing out of a certain phase of your life and kind of transitioning from your like childhood to adolescence. It deals a lot with that. So you've got 2 fronts here. You have Lindsay, who has spent the last several years passing out candy with her mom and dressing up and greeting trick-or-treaters, now wants to go off with her new freak friends and hang out with them on Halloween night, as opposed to passing out candy with her mom, who takes it way too seriously. But she loves Halloween, and I can admire that. Then you have Sam, who wants to trick or treat still. He still wants to dress up and go out and get candy with his friends.
He's very innocent.
Very, very innocent. And that's what he's done every single year. But I think this is kind of the point where he realizes, like, shit, we're too old for this.
Mm-hmm.
And they're getting ridiculed and bullied for doing so.
Not only by their peers, but by parents passing out candy.
The parents passing
getting
out
like
candy.
Doors slammed in their face.
Yeah. So, and I feel bad. So like Lindsay kind of like leaning more into her rebellion side. Like they go off like doing some pranks and stuff, and they're like like throwing eggs at houses and
smashing pumpkins.
They decide and smashing pumpkins. They decide they're going to egg a person, and she unknowingly, at the time that she does it, at least, she accidentally eggs her little brother who's out trick or treating.
Yeah.
And man, this just like kicks off this whole like, shit, I am a terrible person. I feel really bad.
I've disappointed my family.
The first instance where she realizes that like she's going a little too hard with the freaks, and she's not being true to herself because she feels it. And also like her mom trick like Halloween around like this is 1980. Halloween is kind of changing at this point. If you're trying to hand out like non-packaged or homemade goods, people are turning them away because there have been stories about people putting drugs and razor blades in their shit. And so that just doesn't fly anymore. And
so
I think
it's a change for everyone.
It's a change. It's kind of, even for the parents, it's a change for everyone. And everyone's kind of bummed out. Mm-hmm. And at least Lindsay, like after egging her brother and feeling bad about that, she does go home and she dresses up in a costume and hands out candy with her mom. So like she kind of comes back around to that. But holy shit, like, traditions, childhood traditions, and dealing with that change and trying to figure out like that balance of, like growing up, but also still wanting to be a kid. This is was one of the hardest points in life to really navigate.
Yeah.
When did you stop trick-or-treating?
I was trying to think of that. So I feel like the last year that I trick-or-treated, I would have been the same age as like Sam's character. Because aren't they freshmen?
Yeah.
I would have been a freshman. And I mean, me and my friends who went out, we knew we were kind of too old, but we just wanted to have fun. It was like after school. Halloween was like during like a weeknight, like a school night. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I don't know. We weren't going to parties or anything at that point. We were freshmen. We just wanted to have a good time. I don't even remember what we dressed up as, but we just dressed up, and we still apparently felt innocent enough to go trick-or-treating. And we ran around like my friend's neighborhood, and then we went back and watched Halloween movies and went to bed. So I don't know. That was the last year, because I remember even us walking around, we were like, are we too old like to do this? Or I don't know. And just questioning that the next year we didn't go.
Yeah.
So
I feel a little gypped. I think the last time I can remember actually dressing up and trick-or-treating for myself was the 4th grade.
What? No.
So by the time I was in the 5th grade, I had like a little brother, very like 10 years younger than me, little brother and little sister. And I felt like I still walked around trick-or-treating, but I was kind of responsible for them. So like, I don't even remember dressing up anymore at this point. And also I was living in Kentucky at this point, and like we moved out of town, like out into this, like we lived in a trailer on some land like outside of town, and it was a little bit of a drive. So we would kind of like come into town to my aunt's house and go trick-or-treating around there. And it wasn't like, the houses are still a little spread out. Like it's not like a super walkable neighborhood like we live in now. So I don't know, there's just something about it. Like I just didn't really enjoy it
Okay.
as much anymore. So I kind
That's
of like,
sad.
I know, like I feel like I got gypped out of like a couple of like really good years
Yeah.
of trick or treating. But then like I
But
moved.
we relive that as parents
Yeah,
now.
we relived that
So,
with our kids to an
yeah.
extent. And when I mentioned earlier, when I was 14 in the seventh grade, moved out of my mom's and moved in with my dad. So by the time I was in like eighth grade, I can remember I got invited to a Halloween party that year in eighth grade, and so much happened at this Halloween. Like, so my this friend had like a farm, so like there was so much space to like. I remember we were doing like flashlight like hide and seek.
Mm-hmm.
This I had my first kiss this night
In eighth grade?
in eighth grade. I had my first actual like
That's really late.
like not just like a peck. Like I don't really count like quick little like peck kisses that weren't really like this is like my first time. Like I have this girlfriend and we kissed for real. Like this is the first time I really count it.
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. So if you think eighth grade was kind of late for your first kiss, wait till we get into the sex conversation here in a few episodes.
Was it just like 2
snowballs
weeks later?
It snowballs too fast. But yeah, so for me, like I enjoyed that night so much. It was so fun being on this farm and like just running around with all of my friends, and like we had space to kind of just like spread out and do all this fun stuff, and you know, just all of that. Like I enjoyed it so much. And I kind of like reawoke and like, I love Halloween. I love fall time. I love like these types of festivities. And I think that's what kind of carried over into like in high school. I mentioned that I hosted an annual Halloween party where there would be a different theme with different types of horror films in blah, 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 blah. Like I did that almost every year of high school. I think I did in my freshman year, but sophomore, junior, and senior year, I definitely did that. That even carried over into college where I was hosting bigger parties. So I really love that, like kind of like, you know, like social aspect of Halloween and hosting, something we don't do anymore. And I would really love to try that again sometime. Maybe we need to make some more friends. I don't know. But yeah, so that was, I think fourth grade was my last time trick-or-treating.
That's so sad.
How did you spend Halloween as a high schooler?
So I remember I would have been all of the years after, I think my sophomore year, I went to like a church party.
Okay.
Which was fun. It's not as lame as it sounds.
Your youth group,
it was
right?
like my youth group friends, which were a big part of my life. So that would have been like a really fun time.
Yeah.
But then the last 2 years I was working, and I remember specifically working
on
each Halloween night.
That sucks.
Which was kind of fun in itself though, because when we got off work, I worked at a movie theater, so you know that. I'm just telling the listener. Worked at a movie theater, so when we would close, which would be like after midnight, we would go watch whatever we wanted, like Halloween themed movies.
At this point, it would have been November 1st.
So
after midnight.
Yeah, we watched some Halloween movies after close. So that's kind of how I celebrated, just with kind of like some of my work friends watching some Halloween movies after close. So
okay. Outside of Halloween, are there any like any other instances of kind of just like childhood traditions that you like remember like around like that high school age having to kind of like give up or like growing out of? Or
honestly, most of them were like
or
holiday related.
Yeah.
So it's like you spend that with your family typically anyways. I feel like Halloween's that only holiday where it's really hard because there is that transition from family to friends big time. So that is the difficult one. But Christmas, it's like you're always around your family for the most part. So that's not really a hard one to change.
Yeah.
I would say until you start your own family, and then it becomes the dynamic of how do we do this? But
the only thing that I can remember, like by the time I was in high school, that I was kind of really starting to give up, like even past the point of like being at that age where you played with toys, I still collected a lot. And I kind of grew out of that because it seemed dorky at the time. So like I kind of grew out of that. Like really a lot of my collections I kind of grew out of. Like I collected Pokemon cards, like even up into that age. Yeah, some of those sorts of things that were a little geekier, I did grow out of for a while. Pro wrestling was a big one that in high school, like that was like all the way up until high school. every single Monday night was frozen pizza and Monday Night Raw for so many years. That's just what I did, and it was my thing. And suddenly, like, all these things that I enjoyed so much as a kid didn't seem very cool in high school, and I stopped doing them for a long time. That's for me, like, those were some of the things that I felt like I kind of gave up in
Yeah.
high school.
That's sad.
Yeah, a little
A little
bit.
sad.
Episode 4. So this episode, and I'm gonna have to look into this, and maybe we'll kind of come back to the reasoning in the second part of this episode, which we'll release next week. But this episode is titled "Kim Kelly is My Friend," and this episode was actually banned from airing, so they skipped this episode altogether, which I'm sure confused some people, because I feel like there's some stuff that happens in this that were relevant to the progression of the series.
Right.
So for them to just straight up skip an entire episode. So in this episode, Kim invites Lindsay over to dinner. And I think it's because her parents, or her mom at least, because I don't think her dad's in the picture. I think it's her mom and her stepdad. Her mom is threatening to sell her car because she doesn't, like, I don't know if it's like they need the money or what, but like she thinks that like Kim's kind of wasting her life and is up to no good and shouldn't have this car. So Kim invites Lindsay over to show that she has like smart, good friends, like people that she hangs out around.
But she also has to let Lindsay know that, like, hey, basically, I've been using you as my alibi to my parents for like all this time.
I'm not lying to my parents. I have this smart friend that's good, and I hang out around this person. I'm not just off doing the sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
So Lindsay feels a bit used, a little bit like, oh, but I thought we were gonna start a real friendship, but this is just you trying to look good to your mom.
Yeah. And I think this is kind of one of the moments where I think despite Kim using Lindsay, I think that Lindsay feels bad for Kim and her situation, and they do start to kind of grow, like bond a little bit more at this stage. This is also it's a kind of a funny episode. I think where at the end of it kind of does the flip. Is this the one where like after she leaves home, she goes and stays the night with Lindsay, and she has dinner with her family?
Yeah, and this is the episode where basically everyone all around, like at first everyone thinks that Kim, she's a freak and she's bad news, but it breaks down like she has a rough family life. So they agree, like, let's take, she's having a rough time. Let's take her in for the night. So Lindsay's parents, who are ultra strict, kind of give in a little bit. But then there's some like pretty serious like sexual stuff that happens towards the end of the stuff, or towards the end of the episode stuff with her boyfriend coming over. That's the episode, right?
Where like they come over, like they'd gotten into some kind of like argument or something. So like I remember like Nick knocks at the door and he goes like, "Hey, Daniel's out in the car. He wants to talk to you." And then like eventually Daniel just kind of barges in, and they get into this big fight in the kitchen.
They're like hitting each other. That could be the reason for the ban. There's like some domestic violence technically in this episode. Maybe. They're like full on like hitting each other.
But then it quickly turns into like, oh, like they kind of just like have this like they make up and in the middle of the kitchen start like making out. And I don't know how far it goes.
It seems to
but
go
everyone kind
beyond,
of backs out like, oh, let's give them their privacy.
They're like on the counters in this like family's home.
There's a few reasons that this technically probably could have gotten banned. But yeah, major kind of themes for this episode are friendship, family issues, and kind of just acceptance of, like just that some people, like some people's situations are not the same as yours, and everyone has their own shit going on, and this might be, some of the reasons that this person acts the way that they do. Did you have a lot of friends that were kind of from different cliques than what you would typically hang out with?
Yeah, I had so many friends that I would just think to myself like, holy shit, like this is their life, this is their family life. Because as much as I feel like I struggled with like the class and like money spectrum with my family, I had a great family. Like I can't complain about like how they treated me. So like my family was really great to me. I always felt very loved. And I knew so many kids growing up who just weren't loved, and that it was always really sad. And you could see that come out in their behavior. And I would always wonder, like, why do they fucking act like that? Like, why? Like, this teacher is literally telling them to like sit down and shut up. Why don't they just do it? I always wondered that.
Oh, we know now that that's probably ADHD and autism cocktails.
Well, there's that, but there's also just like the defiance, and like there's just kids who weren't raised with support or boundaries or anything, and they just felt like they could do whatever.
And see, that's something that I feel like I tended to struggle with, is like my parents didn't give me a lot of boundaries and rules outside of like when I lived with my mom, she had remarried for a few years, and the stepdad that I had, being like kind of almost like strict for no reason, I guess, was very mentally and physically abusive. So outside of that, I didn't have like a lot of like rules, or like there wasn't really consequences to the shit that I would get into, especially when I moved in with my dad, because most of the time it was just my dad. He worked second shifts most of my high school years, and he had 3 rules for me: make good grades, don't get pregnant. Well, don't get someone pregnant. Don't end up in jail. Those were his 3 rules. I actually did decently well. Like in the first part of high school, like I kind of faltered on my grades a little bit, but once I realized what I wanted to do and that I did want to go to college, I turned that around immediately. Like I instantly, like I just clicked into like straight A's for the rest of high school.
Yeah.
It really wasn't that hard. I just had to try.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a lot of boundaries. I didn't have a lot of rules, and I think that there's struggles that come with that side of things too. Not having a strict parent or somebody kind of like, setting these boundaries in place for a reason.
Yeah.
And kind of just coming up with your own moral compass and figuring that shit out for yourself. Like that's hard for a teenager to do. To be your own,
when you don't have a good example. Yeah. So
like,
why did you get me pregnant? I'm just kidding. That's a whole other story.
That's post college even.
Yeah, but so barely.
But yeah, so like I mean, as far as like different cliques and everything, like I definitely like I had friends in different groups, because like I was kind of like I felt very lost, and I was just trying to figure out like who are these people? Who do I like being around? Who do I get along with the most? Who do I click with the most? Like I had my bandmates that were kind of burnouts that like I tolerated a lot of times, because we played music together and I loved music. I loved music so much. I started making like all of my theater friends and getting really, really involved there. And I think that they really became like my biggest support system throughout high school, and kind of like what stabilized me initially. So like it is hard, like when you have like friends from different groups, kind of balancing like where you spend your time and everything. I was lucky enough to where I had a very small school though. Like my graduating class was, I think, 160, which is not that much.
Yeah, that's small.
It was a small town. So like there was a lot of bleed over between groups anyway, just because you kind of had to. Otherwise, like who the fuck are you hanging out with? Because there's not enough.
Yeah. Everyone knew each other.
Did you have any friends that you ever hung out with regularly that your parents didn't approve of?
Oh yeah, for sure. There would always be, like, at any stage of life, I feel like at least one friend that I'd bring around that my parents would kind of side eye, like, I don't know about that.
Comments
like,
about after they went there.
They'd always be like, I don't know if I like their family, or I don't know if I, because they'd have to, depending on what age it was, meet. But like high school, yeah, there was always at least one that my parents would be like, no, you're not going out with them, or no, like whether it be a boy or a date or a friend, or that they made comments about. And that made me want to hang out with them more. So I would just be like, you know what? I wouldn't say this ever, but in my mind, I'd be like, you know what? Fuck you. Like, who are you to judge this person? I'm going to be their best friend now and just like do the opposite.
And that's kind of what Lindsay does.
Yeah.
In this instance, is like,
she
who are
exactly
you to like judge these people? You don't know them. You don't know.
Yeah.
You don't barely even know me. Like, I'm going to do this despite you.
Yeah.
I make good grades. I don't fuck up. So why can't I hang out with these people? So it very much is kind of like Lindsay's story there. So for me, like I said, like having a dad that didn't really like have a lot of rules and stuff for me, and like also being kind of like, I was a smart kid that did pretty well in school, but also had a rebellious side. Like I didn't really like my dad didn't never said like, oh, I don't like that person or you shouldn't hang out with him. There might be the occasion where like I sometimes could feel like people I was hanging out with, maybe their parents didn't necessarily like me.
Oh, really? I
would
never
start,
felt that.
no, so like I don't think that that's how it was. I would feel pressure, like kind of thinking
Okay.
that though, and like I think it's like early stages of my social anxiety, things that I would worry about. But I actually always did pretty well with other people's parents. Like parents really liked me. Like I think I've always been self-aware enough to be able to kind of fit in to the circumstance. I know what's appropriate and what's not appropriate around different people. I know I've always done really well with like girlfriends' parents because of that too. Like I'd never like I just be respectful, be appropriate, and anything that falls out of line with those things, make sure that they don't see it happening.
Yeah.
So
I've always been great with parents and like older people of any kind.
well, your best friend in your early years was like 65.
Yeah, I just know how to connect with old people.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure why that is, but like that relates to like anyone older. Like they like me.
So do you think
know.
that by the time that you get into your 60s, you're just going to be like the bee's knees and like everyone's going to want to be your friend because you're just like, these are my people? Or do you think you'll be hanging out in cemeteries with all of your 60-year-old friends?
Oh, I'll be in the cemeteries just vibing. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I've always had a talent for making older people like me.
I was going to ask, my last question for this episode was like, were there any family issues you faced that impacted your friendships? But I think we've kind of already hit on that quite a bit. Like, I think for you, just kind of like some of the religion aspects of it kind of impacted your high school experience to an extent and kind of put a lot more limitations on you.
Very much.
I think for me was the lack of boundaries and expectation.
Okay.
Was hard. Like when you don't have that expectation.
It was hard?
When you don't have that expectation put on you or you don't have those boundaries set for you, how do you keep yourself on the straight and narrow? Like how do you keep yourself motivated and moving forward and in line? I had to self-govern as a teenager, which is hard for a teenager to do.
That's a really impressive talent, honestly, as a teenager with no guidance.
Yeah.
And
I struggle with it a lot more as an adult than I ever did as a teenager, like focusing on work and getting my shit. I mean, I always get my shit done, but like sometimes I procrastinate quite a bit, which I guess I did then too.
I mean, it's like you have a bunch of other people to worry about other than yourself now. I mean, as a teenager, you're just worried about you, right?
Yeah.
And now you have a whole family. So that's pretty normal.
All right. Episode 5. I think we're going to have a lot to say on this one. So I wanted to kind of skip over the last one a little bit. But episode 5 is called Tests and Breasts. Basic rundown of this. Daniel convinces Lindsay to help him cheat on a test, causing her to question her morals. And then Sam and his friends they're going through sex education and they're very confused by a joke that they hear, which we never hear the joke.
Yeah, that's the running joke is like you never hear it.
You don't know what the joke is, but they're very confused and embarrassed about like not understanding this joke. And it leads to all kinds of shenanigans in the episode, just trying to understand what is going on. They at one point they're given a porno tape to kind of review and like, oh, you'll understand it. And I think that just confuses them even more.
It makes them feel very out of touch. Like,
yeah. So this is another really, really great episode, but major themes here: cheating, academic pressure in general, and just kind of like gender roles and being comfortable with your changes and sexuality at that age, and also comfortable with like not knowing as much as others might know. And fuck, that can be hard. That can be really hard when like you don't know. A good example here, Sam's asked to come up to the front of the room and point out a certain part. Like there's a diagram of a vagina and uterus and labia and like all those parts. And he's asked to point out something. And he kind of just says like, here, and everyone chuckles. And like, I think that his like confidence just takes a huge hit there.
Well, because he's also just like not disgusted, but like he's not ready.
Yeah,
for
he's
that.
just he's not ready
He's
for
very
it. And
innocent.
that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Like teenagers are kind of pressured to like jump into this when they're not ready for it.
Regarding that, I can relate to that a little bit. Just having to pretend or like lie maybe about how much you know about certain things. I was really late, I guess, getting my period. Way later than anybody that I know in school. So that was something that I had to lie about to everybody. And you're probably,
When you say way late,
I was almost 16.
okay.
So you're probably wondering, like, why would I be talking about my period to everybody? That's just what girls did. Like, girls would talk about, like, oh, I started my period, because it's all new. It's all like, it was almost like, oh, have you ever started your period yet? Type of a thing. That's what girls would talk about. And you just kind of had to pretend, like, people would be like, oh, I got my period today and I was in gym class. You know, just those tropes where they're like complaining and it was the worst day and all of that. And I would be like, yeah, I totally understand. Like that happens to me like every month.
Do you? Sorry. I'm chuckling over here because I'm just remembering the episode of South Park where Cartman and all the boys like they pretend to get their period.
Yes, because they don't know what it is. Yeah.
But did you ever?
No, that was me. That was me. 100%.
Do you ever feel like in high school, especially? I mean, the emotions that come like in mood swings that come with somebody menstruating. They're very, very exaggerated by like not only sometimes like the person experiencing it, but like people tend to fucking put like weird exaggerations on it from the other end of it too, like being around people having their period. Do you ever feel like people like girls in high school would kind of use their period as an excuse to act a certain way though?
To act a certain way, maybe, but there's certain things now, like even as an adult, sometimes I feel like I need to take off work.
Yeah.
And I'm not exaggerating.
I'm not saying that you're not feeling a certain way, but
like it's painful sometimes. Like it depends on like how your hormones are going. But like there's been times in like recent months where I was like, shit, I feel like I need to take a sick day. Like I'm feeling really bad. I can't stand up straight.
I think it's getting worse as you're getting older.
No, it's a hormonal changes. Like last month was great. Didn't even feel it. The month before I was doubled over. You know what I mean? So it just depends on what's going on. But in my experience, your mood swings come the week before. You're not moody on your period. That's why it's called PMS. It's the hormones before. Yeah. The pain of it all happens during. But yeah, I think that's always like my favorite line that Daniel Desario does to his girlfriend Kim in the show is like, "What are you on your period?" Like
just because she's like yelling.
She'll be like acting like just like a bitch, and he'll just be like, "What are you on your
is her
period?"
Like resting state.
Yeah, but for some reason that's so 80s. Yeah, like that really is such an
80s thing to say.
It's great.
So for me, like, I never, still haven't gotten my first period, but so yeah, like sex and just like the whole like puberty thing, like it, for some people, it takes a little while.
Yeah.
For other people, whether it hits early or late, it hits all at once.
Well, some people are in the 4th grade and some people are fucking driving.
Yeah.
So
I mentioned earlier that I didn't have my first kiss until I was in the 8th grade. And granted, there's a few years difference here, but I was always one of those people that like I was like so dead set on like I'm going to save my virginity, not because of religious reasons, but just because like I know that like I at least knew that there's a lot of negativity that can, and like just it can like fuck up relationships, and like sex adds this whole other complicated layer to things. And I have always been of the mindset that when I find my person, that's the person that I want to be with. I don't want to be, someone who goes through a divorce. I don't want to because my parents did that to me and it fucking sucked. And like, even at this age, like I kind of like, I feel like that translated even over into like just the the idea of sex until it didn't. Like I was always very strict on that.
Mhm.
And then suddenly, I was a week shy of turning 16. So I'm only 15 years old. I had my first like kind of like sexual encounter with a girl that I was dating, and that escalated very quickly to also being the first time that I ever had sex in my life.
Oh, well, I'm glad we all know that.
Yeah, I'm an open book here. But like that's the thing is like I went from being like so like I knew where my stance was on sex to fuck, throw that all out the window, because when you're, especially for like, I don't know if this is the same way for girls, but for guys, you really don't have a straight head on. And there's a good decade of your life where you make so many poor decisions based around like your fucking hormones.
Yeah.
And just like, you're not thinking, that's the problem. You're really not thinking.
Yeah.
And suddenly I threw out everything that I believed in at that stage, just because like, shit, this is good.
Yeah.
Let's do more of that.
Yeah.
So
it goes out the window really quick.
It does. And once you open that box, there's no putting it back in. So I feel like I kind of gypped myself on that first experience just a little bit. And like looking back on it, like it was fine. It wasn't anything special. But then again, who really has a special first time? It's probably rare that most people do.
Yeah.
So let's kind of like look at the more like the other side of this episode, the academic pressure, cheating. Do you ever remember like feeling so much academic pressure to like make good grades or do well on a test where you actually cheated?
I can say confidently never.
So
I never cheated.
You never cheated?
No. I never cheated. I never wanted to cheat. I never felt like I needed to.
So I only ever cheated in one class, and I cheated consistently in this class. And I almost feel like I put more effort into cheating than I would have studying.
Okay.
To the point where I think by the time I actually took the test, I actually pretty well knew the content of the test.
But you're still cheating.
But I still, to me, it was almost just kind of this like fun little thing that I did. Like, can I
like an
get away
adrenaline
with,
rush type of a thing?
Can I get away with cheating on this test? Like, is my teacher going to notice? And the lengths that I went throughout the class, I took Japanese in high school. I think I mentioned that in our travel episode. I was pretty good with Japanese in high school. I fucking loved the class. But for whatever reason, I decided this is the class where I'm going to do anything and everything that I can to cheat on tests.
Okay.
And I think it was more of a fun thing for me, just because like out of boredom, I think that I was actually like so good at it that I was bored.
Okay.
So like to add an extra element to the class to kind of spice it up for myself, I was just doing all these different things to cheat. So I can remember one example, and this was a different time. I had an iPod and I recorded myself doing translations.
What?
In an audio file.
What the heck?
Like do like just vocabulary and small phrases, sentences, things like that. And I remember I would wear a hoodie almost every day at this stage in my high school. I would run the old like white iPod
through your
earbuds
sleeve.
Through my sleeve and have it in my hand to where I could put my hand up to my ear, kind of make it just look like I'm leaning my head onto my hand. And I could listen to myself giving myself the answers and write them down.
So that's so funny. I used to do that to actually just listen to music during class, but I never did it to cheat. Like I just wanted to be like hearing some jams while the class was going on. And again,
like the idea of like recording yourself and like an audio file of yourself, that's so common now. Like people record stuff all the time. Like I didn't know, like nobody had recording equipment. Nobody had like the know-how of like, how do I get this on an iPod?
Well, I did have one instance where a teacher thought I cheated. And it was because it was my Spanish 4 class. It was either Spanish 4 or AP Spanish. I can't remember. I had a C in the class at that time. Not because I was bad. It was very good. It was homework lazy. That's why I had a C. So I had
Which
a
happens
C.
to us all.
Yeah. So we were taking the final exam, and do you remember like how long final exams were? Like they took like over an hour, like they were long,
Longer than your
tedious,
typical
like
tests.
they were long.
Yeah.
It was our
It was
year
the
end.
culmination of
Yeah,
everything that you've learned in this class.
it was our year end final exam. Well, not only did I get 100% on the final exam, I got all 5 of the extra credit questions correct on the final exam. So I got like 105% on the final exam, and I got the highest scoring perfect score in the whole school. So, understandably, my teacher thought I cheated. So they pulled me into the guidance counselor, similar to this episode, to like bring it up. Weren't suspicious of me cheating. Like they didn't have a suspicion of somebody else. So I wasn't with somebody. They're basically just in a nice way asking, okay, let's be real. You have a C in this class right now, but you got the highest score out of anyone. You
Why
got
is
a
it
higher
so hard
score
for educators to like accept
because
that
I got a
somebody
higher
can
score.
do okay on a test? Like just because you don't typically perform well
Yeah.
in a test way, you're a smart kid and you fucking did well.
That's the thing is I always did great on tests. That's why I was confused. It was such a hard test and it was the full year culmination. And since I was lazy with homework at that point in time, I did better than our valedictorian. So I think they were like,
Yeah.
why did you get a perfect score on this? And it's
You're better
because
than
I
the
was
valedictorian.
It's because I
Fuck
was
you.
fucking good at Spanish and it
Yeah.
was one of my strengths. So like learning a language is really easy for me. So I don't know. So that was the only like time I was ever accused. I can look you in the eye and tell you I did not cheat. I just got a perfect score and I'm really proud of that.
High-fiving you from across the room. All right, episode 6. I'm with the band. So this episode is very much a big Nick and Lindsay episode. Well, I mean, there's some Sam stuff here too. We'll get into that stuff, but yeah, Nick is he wants to be. I mentioned earlier that his dad's ultra strict and wants him to join the army, but Nick's dream is to be a drummer. He all the freaks, they kind of have this band together. They fuck around in his basement and play music, pretty similar to a lot of the stuff that I would do in high school. But he wants to take it more seriously because he actually wants to, like, he thinks that that's the one thing that's going to save him from having to join the army is, you know, like I can make it as a drummer. And the bandmates, similar to my experience, they just want to fuck around and they won't take it seriously. So he quits the band. Oh man, yeah, this is kind of the episode where like Lindsay's really kind of struggling with what her role is in this group, and she kind of thinks that she has feelings for Nick, but also like doesn't.
I always took it as like I think she sees potential in him and she's like, well, he's the closest to what I could envision of a person of me being with in this group.
Yeah.
But not quite on the mark.
Yeah, so she encourages him to audition for this this other band that actually does perform and write music. She encourages him to audition for this, and that audition doesn't go very well, which leads to like she ends up like I think she feels bad for him, so she kisses him, and shit, that might have been the wrong choice.
We've all been there.
We've all been there.
It's a hard one to get out of.
The old pity kiss.
Yeah.
And like, fuck, why did I just do that? And now you have to live with the consequences of that.
And then instead of being honest, you're just like, now I have to play along with this for a minute because that's somehow nicer than just being honest.
Yeah. On the other side of this with the geeks, what they have going on in this episode is just they're being mandated, like forced to take showers after gym class. And
that's so cruel.
It's so, I mean, it is, but first off, I part of me feels like you should just get over your shit. Like, I know that it's a body image thing, but like,
yeah, but I'm just imagining being forced to shower with people in high school. Like,
were you not?
No.
Oh,
we did not shower with people in high
so
school.
I remember in middle school, like we were kind of given the option, And most of the time, I probably should have showered in middle school, but I chose not to, and I was probably smelly the rest of the day. But especially by the time you get around to high school, you're just smellier in general. Like
Yeah,
puberty really does a number on your body.
we did not shower in our school.
So I only had to take gym my freshman and sophomore year. I didn't have to do gym classes after that point. And a lot of sophomore year was actually like we did a lot of swimming. So I didn't feel as pressured to shower after swimming.
Yeah.
But freshman year, it was mandatory. Like we were supposed to shower afterwards.
Everybody? The girls too?
Girls, boys, everybody was supposed to shower.
We changed clothes.
Yeah, but
like we didn't, I don't know. I never felt particularly nasty.
I do just remember though, like feeling like it felt weird at first. Like, I don't know, but I think he kind of just learned like, oh, well, they're all probably feeling the same way. And like, I think it probably is a little bit harder if you're bullied heavily, which I mean, I definitely went through like my spats in like middle school and younger where I was bullied from time to time. But by high school, like I think I've kind of like found my place, and I wasn't like as like, I don't know, I wasn't as much of a loser, I guess. So like I wasn't bullied as much at that point. Yeah. Also, like I hit a growth spurt and I was a bigger kid. I feel like I didn't quite get to my full height, but like, I mean, I'm 6 foot now. I feel like I'd hit that like upper 5 foot range pretty early in high school. So I don't think like, even if I was super geeky still, like people didn't really, I don't know, try to mess with me because a lot of the boys were a little lagging in their height until a little later. But yeah, it was a weird thing at first, especially like in middle school. Like I struggled with that quite a bit, but once you kind of get over it, and I think that's kind of like where the geeks in this episode, like they eventually like Bill and Neil kind of get over it and they just do it. Sam's the holdout though, and he refuses to. But finally, by the end of the episode, he's like, fuck it, I'm going to do it. And I don't remember how exactly this happens, but he finally like, he strips down, he's going to go shower, and his bully, what was the bully's name? Alan,
yeah.
His bully steals his clothes and pushes him out the gym door, locking it behind him. And Sam is he's stuck in the hallway. The bell's about to ring. He has no clothes, no cover. So what do you do in this situation? Like, oh, well, he has his lockers down the hall. And he thinks that he has some clothes there. So he's going to try to just fucking run.
So he just runs through the whole school naked.
And the bell rings and he immediately like I think panics and doesn't go for his lock. Like he's just running through the halls of the school.
Well, he almost sees his crush. So he avoids the locker.
Oh, that's what it was. He avoids the locker. Yeah, because his crush was down.
So he ends up just running throughout the entirety of the school. And it ends up giving him like a lot of like street cred because everyone's like, great, we heard you streaked, Sam. Go you.
Oh, yeah. We don't need to get too much into like, we talked about showering, blah, 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 whatever. But what were some of your dreams and aspirations in high school? Let's go back to like the Nick part of the conversation.
My dreams.
Your dreams and aspirations in high school.
You know, they changed all the time. I wanted to do something creative, and what it boils down to is something creative and something full of passion, because we're all very angsty at that age, and you think that you're so creative, and maybe we are at that age. Maybe that's the peak of your like passion and creativity.
I don't think that it's the peak of your creativity, but I think that it is the perfect sweet spot where you're not only discovering your creativity and really motivated by it, but you're also not like so fearful of what others think yet.
Oh, I was.
Well, like fearful of what other people think of you, but not necessarily your creativity.
Yeah.
Think back to like some of the creative things that you would have been doing back then, how cringy they were.
So cringy.
You thought they were cool though.
Yeah.
So I think that you weren't as like held back by like other people's expectations and what they thought.
But yeah, whatever it would have been, I had a creative mind and I just wanted to express myself creatively. I honestly had no clue what I really wanted to be when I grew up. I still don't.
I'm still figuring out like the right balance of it, but I haven't always like I've known since high school roughly what I wanted to be doing. And for the most part, I think I've stuck to it. I think I've mentioned on the podcast in a previous episode that I think when I was probably sophomore year of high school, one of my friends, like their brother had a little like Sony Handycam, like little like small camcorder, and they had done a shot for shot remake of Beastie Boys' Sabotage music video. And I just thought that was so fucking cool. So like that's what I asked for Christmas that year, was like a little camcorder. And I got one, and I fell in love with shooting stupid little videos and skits, making YouTube videos. Like that was a big thing. Like that was a new thing back then.
New
New YouTube. And like I just fell in love with like editing and storytelling and sequences and kind of putting this puzzle together. That really did snowball. Like that's one of the things that I think saved me in high school and got me to be serious about, because like I wanted to go to school for film production. I wanted to be a director. I wanted to make movies. And I've worked in film and TV. I have directed film, but I never quite made it in that direction, like really where I wanted to be. There's still time for me. And I think that part of where I'm grappling right now is trying to get myself over, like, okay, like stop saying I can't do this, because you definitely can. Just fucking do it. I have stayed within the realm of video production. I still do video production. I still do creative work. I do a lot of different things. I'm doing this podcast. That's kind of what takes up a lot of my time now. But eventually I will get around to getting over my shit and becoming who I'm truly meant to be.
I believe in you.
Thank you.
I think
I believe in you.
Thank you.
So we were gonna go through the first 9 episodes in part 1, and then do the episodes 10 through 18 in the next part, which would come out next week. But we kind of taking our time a little bit here.
We had a lot to unpack for these first episodes,
and it's been. I think that the gist, like the gist of like who we were in high school, that's really been coming out, especially the first few episodes that we broke down. So I think we're actually going to cut it, before we start episode 7 here. So yeah, I think that'll be it for this week, and then we'll get into the rest of it in the following. Maybe we'll end up splitting this into 3 parts. I don't fucking know. We'll figure it out.
Well, if you haven't watched the show, that'll give you some extra time to maybe binge it
And get to the end before we ruin it for you.
Exactly.
We'll try not to ruin too much, but again, it's a great fucking show. I really loved rewatching it. There's so much that just kind of like resonated with me and like clicked for me in my high school experience. And I'm learning a lot about Kandace, and Kandace is learning way too much about me.
We're learning, and our listeners are learning way too much about my period.
Yeah. But yeah, this has been fun, and I'm excited to kind of jump back into this when we're feeling a little more refreshed, and get through the rest of these episodes, because there's some really great questions coming up, and there's some really great episodes coming up too. Some of them take a little bit more of a serious tone. But yeah, this has been fun. I'm your co-host, Justin Tyler.
And I'm Kandace Tyler.
This has been the Couple Podcast. Make sure to check out Freaks and Geeks. And if you enjoyed this episode, go back and listen to other episodes, and be on the lookout for part 2, which will come out next week, and potentially part 3, depending on how far we get in that second recording. We might do this as, split it up into 3, 6 episodes each, as opposed to 2 with 9 episodes. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But thanks.
Math.